Hi everybody, my name is Christian LeBlanc. I teach 6th grade Sunday school, Catholic Sunday school at St. Mary's Catholic Church in Greenville, South Carolina. The subject of my talk tonight is love and marriage from Genesis to Revelations. Most of this is condensed from things that we cover all year round in catechism class, and I hope you enjoy it. Hope you learn something. Given that we're going to start with Genesis, since that is the title of the presentation, let's start with Genesis. The first thing I want to talk about is thinking about things that God is, and the kids are always very forthcoming with these answers. They're very bright. For example, God is all-loving. God is all-knowing. God is all-powerful. God is eternal. God is unchanging. And all these things are true. And the interesting point that we make in class is, if God were all these things, but he were not all-loving, would he have bothered to create anything? And the general impression is that no, the thing that makes God want to create is that God is all love, and that this is in the nature of love, is to create. So that's a little short little meme we use all year long in Sunday school, is that love creates. Now, in the case of God, if God is all-powerful and all-knowing, what God creates is everything. And that's what we have for the account in Genesis, is God creating everything. And let's look at that for a second. This is a graph, because 6th grade kids understand graphs. Over here, this is life. Over in this direction is time. And we know that the account of Genesis takes about 6 days. We start down here, there's no real life yet. And God creates a lot of inanimate things, like the stars and the moon and the planets and so forth. He creates rocks and all kinds of things that are not alive. But eventually we get to some living things like trees and plants and so forth. And the days continue to pass, and eventually the life gets a little bit more sophisticated. Let's imagine that we're having little simple things like bugs and fish and birds. And finally we start getting to things like mammals, like this bull. Take my word for it. That is a bull. Anyway, we have the mammals up here, and now we've almost got to the very end of creation, and the whole time, remember, creation is rising and rising and rising. What it grows closer to is God. God is, of course, infinitely high up here, but the longer creation goes, the higher and closer things get to God. And then we get to this moment where, so far, we have had a lot of animals, and now we get to this particular thing. Up until this point, God has always said fiat in Latin. Remember, the first thing God said was fiat lux, let there be light. God doesn't sit there and go, let me make some light. God says, let there be light, and boom, there is light. And all the way up through creation, God is saying, let there be the fish in the sea, let there be the birds in the air, let there be the lights in the heavens. And boom, all these things happen because God thought about it. But then we get to this particular creation, and in this case, God doesn't fiat. Instead, God gets down on the ground, and he brings up some dirt, and he fashions the man, just that one at a time. He doesn't just go say, fiat, fiat man, and there's a billion of them. No, this particular creature has been kind of dignified by the attention that God has paid to him. And all the way through the story, we see that everything was good. Oh, all of it was good. It was good. It was good. It was good. Even the rocks were good. Even the sun was good. Even the stars were good. And at this point, Adam sits at the top, and he's looking around, and everything was good. And I asked the kids, but one thing wasn't good. What is that? And the kids are right there. They say, Adam is alone. Yes, it's a terrible thing that Adam is alone. And what's to be done about that? Well, you know the story, is that God casts a deep sleep over Adam. And while Adam is asleep, God, takes out one of his ribs. Ooh, and that hurt. And you know, it still hurts men to be missing their ribs. And from the rib, God fashioned Eve, a mate for Adam. This is very interesting. One thing is, remember it says, and then God closed Adam up. So he's taken the rib away, and Adam is closed up. Now, Adam is incomplete. He's been closed up, but he's missing his rib. So then the question is, how will Adam ever be complete again? And the answer is, Adam gets his rib back. Yes. Now, that would be Eve. And here she is, and she's such a pretty little thing, and she's got little kissy lips. She's got this beautiful figure, And Adam loves her. And what Adam does, he says, oh, this one at last is bone of my bone and flesh of my flesh. And I know exactly how that is because I'm married and I love it. I come and I hug my wife like this against my side where I think my rib came from. And I say, I have the one back. My rib is back. Now, it's also instructive. God did not reach into Adam and take 2 ribs. He didn't reach into Adam and take 3 ribs. No. How many wives does a man get? He gets 1. That's why he took 1 rib from Adam. That's God's making a point for all of us. Now, there are occasions that we're going to look at tonight where men seem to think that they had more than 1 rib taken away from them, and that doesn't work out very well. What's also notable here is that this is a rising line of creation. If you're made later than something, you're higher. So actually, I like to think of Mary, of Eve, correct me class, of Eve as being a little bit higher than Adam. I think for men, that makes perfect sense because women have the babies and we don't. And it's always been this wonder my whole life since I first saw my little sisters moving around in my mother's stomach and getting to put my hands on her stomach and feel those kids moving around. It's always been a wonder that women have that gift of life that I don't have. And the only way I can access it is to get my rib back. So what I'm showing here is Eve a little bit higher on a pedestal because I think it's reasonable that husbands put their wives on a pedestal and that men in general put women up on a pedestal because the women play a particular higher role in life than we can provide for ourselves. Now, actually, at this point, you would think this is getting toward the end of the 2nd chapter of Genesis, and everything is wonderful. And remember, God's first commandment, what was God's first commandment? No, it was not the commandment to Moses when Moses came down with the 2 stones. What do you know, the 2 stone tablets? No, the first commandment was here in Eden where everything was wonderful, and the first commandment was be fruitful and multiply, which is a wonderful thing because that's exactly what they want to do because they're in love. And what does love want to do? Love creates. What does married love want to do? Married love wants to create babies. Now, the interesting thing about this is a rising line, and the first question was, well, was man the last thing? Was Adam the last thing? No, he was not. The next thing was Eve. But was Eve the last thing? I want to propose that biblically the last creation was not Adam and it was not Eve. Instead, it's Adam and Eve together fulfilling the first commandment. So the highest creation in the whole creation thing at the very top is marriage. Now, at this point, everything was particularly wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. But then, we know what the heartbreak is that Adam and Eve sinned, and sin has ruined things for a long time, ever since then. And in fact, as God said, not only did Adam and Eve sin mess up Adam and Eve, but even God said, what have you done? Even the ground is cursed because of you. In other words, when human beings sin, the consequences ripple out into the entirety of creation. And one of the sad things about this is that from then on, when people would get married and they would love each other and the loving impulses to create children, the burden of sin, the ruination of sin, sometimes means that people that want to have children can't. And I want to look at a couple of examples of those people in the Bible. First of all, it's a lovely story. It's a story of Abraham and Sarah. And of course, Abraham had been told by God, come out here and look up at the sky. Do you know that someday your descendants will be more numerous than these stars? And Abraham was quite fired up about it. Said, man, that's great. But then, of course, he wonders, but I'm old and my dear wife Sarah is old. And, of course, they wanted children so badly. And we know that they were visited one day by 3 strangers who Abraham addresses as the Lord, and they speak as one and they act as one, but it's 3 people. And they let Sarah know that next year she will have a baby. This event is called the hospitality of Abraham. In some sense, you may say that Abraham and Sarah's hospitality when the Lord came to visit them because of their charitable actions, that God rewarded them with a child. And of course, we know that their child was named Isaac. And they were so happy to have this little boy that name in Hebrew is related to the word for laughter. And I know exactly how that is because I remember when my first child was born, and I was so happy it was just beyond anything I could have experienced. And I was laughing. It was just terrific. And I've always had a sort of a soft spot for Abraham and Sarah because of that. And our next one, now, Isaac grew up. Here's what happens to people now that we live in the world of sin. Abraham and Sarah grew old and died. Isaac got married. He married Rebekah. They were a little bit unhappy too because they longed to have children and they weren't having any. And the little miracle to them was that they had not just one baby, but they had two babies, Jacob and Esau. And I love the two of them. Look, here they are. Jacob and Esau. The funny thing about these two little boys is they didn't even get along inside their mother. You get out of here, there's not enough room for you, there's not enough room for me. And their mother's going, y'all calm down in there. And remember that even after they were born, they didn't quite get along, and there was all kinds of mischief and fooling each other and things like that, which we're not going to cover tonight. Now, our next one, let's see, Isaac had children, and one of his sons was Jacob. And Jacob fell in love with Rachel. However, he had to marry her sister Leah first. He was tricked into marrying Leah because she was older. But he still was able to marry Rachel. And the heartbreak is that Leah, who he did not particularly love, but he had a covenantal and spousal relationship with, she had babies like crazy. And Rachel was extremely frustrated by this, and it was so sad because I love this little passage out of Genesis. Let's see. It says, when Rachel saw that she failed to bear children to Jacob, she became envious of her sister. She said to Jacob, give me children or I shall die. In anger, Jacob retorted, can I take the place of God who has denied you the fruit of the womb? And this is just such a heartbreak, because you think of how much Rachel and Jacob loved each other, and yet they're reproaching each other back and forth and fussing, and they're just not happy at all because their normal impulse to create is being stunted. However, God does bless them, and eventually Rachel has Joseph, who of course finds his way to Egypt, and without Joseph having been there, all the people, all of the tribes, all of Jacob's descendants would not have found a hospitable place during the drought. Now, one of the things that's fascinating about all these miraculous mothers is that every time a miraculous mother conceives, the child is not just a run-of-the-mill child. The child's an important child who plays some role in salvation history. Now, the other lesson here, and where did I put them, is that Jacob has two wives, although he only had one rib. So it's no surprise that his marital situation is stressed by having more than one wife. Now, the next little story is about Manoah and his wife. Manoah, his wife, she never had, we don't know what her name is. Trust me, that says Manoah. I don't write very well. And Manoah and his wife were visited by an angel, a messenger of the Lord. And he told Manoah's wife that she would conceive a child. And they were so happy that their love could create once again. And their son was Samson. And now there's one more miraculous birth between Elkanah. I think that's how you spell it. Maybe that's an H. Elkanah. And his wife Hannah. This is another problem where somebody thought that he had had two ribs taken out of him and he only had one. Elkanah was married to two women, Hannah and Peninnah. Like so many of these circumstances when there are two wives and one man, poor Hannah had been unable to conceive. And Elkanah kind of loved her and didn't want her to feel bad because of that. And he would always pay her some extra and special attention. On the other hand, Peninnah had plenty of babies, and she would say mean things to Hannah. She'd say, you know that he loves me more than you because I've had all the children and you can't give him any. And poor old Hannah was, not old, but poor Hannah was just heartbroken. And she went and prayed at the meeting and said, please, Lord, oh, please, if you will give me a son, I will dedicate him to your service. And God answered her prayer. And miraculously, Hannah gave birth to Samuel. And Samuel, of course, was a very important prophet, and among the things he did, he anointed Saul, the first king of Israel, and he also, on the sly, anointed King David. And this is just a culmination showing that all of these occasions where marriage is being injured by the original fallen state. When God fixes it, something special happens in every case. Once we get to Samuel, that's pretty much the end of the miraculous mothers in the Old Testament. Now we come to a miraculous mother in the New Testament, dear Elizabeth, and of course her husband, Zechariah. And you know, in Sunday school, by the time we get to this point, I say, let's talk about another married couple, Elizabeth and Zechariah. And then I just look at them with my mouth closed, and the kids will say, they were unhappy because they couldn't have a baby. And I said, that's right. And what happened? They said, they had a miraculous baby. And I said, yes, they did. In this case, they were visited by the angel Gabriel, Zechariah was. And he says, your wife, Elizabeth, is going to bear a son, and made great predictions as to what the son would achieve in his life, and of course that was John the Baptist. So at this point we have this whole stream of miraculous mothers going all the way back to Abraham and Sarah, and now we're going to finish off that whole stream of miraculous mothers with a particular miracle that's even more miraculous than all of these other ones. And actually, in general terms, I would regard as a man every conception, every birth is a miracle. I just can't get over women's fertility and how they have other little human beings grow inside them. I can just never, ever do that. And I just look at y'all with wonder. And of course, this next miraculous miracle is Mary. And of course, Mary's circumstance is a little bit different because she doesn't have an earthly spouse in the particular sense of conceiving a baby together. Of course, she too is visited by Gabriel, just as her cousin Elizabeth was. And of course, you know the story. Gabriel says, well, you know, you're going to conceive a child and name him Jesus, and thus and so. And Mary says, well, how's this going to happen? And I love this line. He says, the Holy Spirit will come upon you, and the power of the Most High will overshadow you. This is kind of a particular term about marriage, overshadow. Remember, if you were in a desert culture, overshadowing is good. When you live in the temperate culture, you think, oh, there's a shadow hanging over me, and that's always bad because it's dark and it's cold and it's wet. But if you live in the desert, why, to be overshadowed is a wonderful thing. For example, out in the desert when Moses first got everybody out of Egypt, God said, oh, I need to live with you. And he said, you build me a tent. And the tent had the Ark of the Covenant in it, and it had a couple of cherubim. And there was all this overshadowing. The cherubim's wings overshadowed the Ark of the Covenant. The meeting tent overshadowed the whole interior. And then God's Shekinah cloud, God's glory, hovered over the meeting tent and overshadowed it. Now, this is all indicating covenantal relationship when these things happen. And in a marital sense, there's this charming, charming story. Let's see, where is that? Here we go. It's about Ruth. And in the little story of Ruth, it's very short and it's very romantic. Ruth is a widow, and she returns to her dead husband's ancestral home in order to find a relative of his that will marry her so that she, with this other husband, will be able to have children, sort of in the name of her deceased husband. Well, her mother points out this man named Boaz to her, and she says, well, Boaz would be a good match for you, I think. But here's what you need to do. It was the threshing season, and everybody would be out harvesting wheat, and they would stay out and stay in the barn and wherever until all the harvesting was done. They didn't come back to town. She said, well, you know that Boaz will be there on the threshing floor in the evening, so what you do is you make yourself up real pretty and nice. And after everybody's asleep, you go in and you lie at Boaz's feet, and he'll probably tell you what to do. And she said, all right. So she does that. And she goes and sleeps at his feet, and eventually he feels that there's somebody down there, and he says, oh, I recognize you. You're Ruth. And she says, yes. She says, would you extend your cloak over me? Would you spread your cloak over me? And what she is literally saying in Hebrew is, will you spread your wing over me? And that comes from the images from the Psalms and other places of how, for instance, King David was on the run from King Saul, and he said, oh, Lord, spread your protecting wings over me and make me safe from the slings and arrows of my enemy. So for Jewish people, for Hebrew people, being overshadowed was more than just a pleasantry. It was a commitment. It was protective. It was isolating. It was separating and dedicating. There are a lot of themes that come from overshadowing. So back to Boaz, when he looked down and he saw Ruth, and she said, well, would you spread your wing over me? He understood that that would be symbolic of a covenantal relationship. In that case, not just covenantal, but because they're a man and a woman, it would be spousal. And he said, well, I could, but there might be some other people that we need to consider as to who might marry you, Ruth. So he didn't overshadow her at that moment, but that would have been the normal thing to do. Now, there's another occasion where overshadowing comes up, and it's covenantal, but it's not spousal. It's nice to have this example. This is my cloak, and I'm Elijah. And there was an occasion when it was time for me to pick a successor, and I went and found Elisha, who was out plowing a field. And as the kids learned from Sunday school, as Elisha went by, I cast my mantle over Elisha's shoulders. And that was showing to people that I was overshadowing Elisha. Now, in this case, it doesn't mean that we would be married, but it means that we would have a covenantal understanding. And by Elisha accepting the mantle of Elijah, it says that he agrees to it. Now, let's pretend, yes, this is also, this theme carries all the way through, even with Jewish weddings. And you remember that, and the kids learn this, that Jewish men have a prayer shawl called a tallit. And when a Jewish man gets married, he's wearing his tallit. Now, normally the tallit is for nobody but the man himself. In fact, when he's going to pray, he makes his own little meeting tent and prays, and he's isolating himself and dedicating to the Lord, and nobody else gets into his little prayer tent. But when it comes time for his marriage, he takes his little tent, his cloak, his wing, and spreads his wing over his wife, and that's symbolizing that he is overshadowing her. Now, once again, of course, when the wedding is over, the tallit is removed, but they still have the covenantal relationship. Even though it was a symbol, the permanence is still there. Now, also at a Jewish wedding, which is kind of charming, is that sometimes a second tallit will be put. Let me put this one back on, pretend it's around my wife. Then another tallit would be put up in the air over the marriage couple. And that symbolizes Abraham and Sarah's tent, because they were the first people to really want to have a baby and they weren't able to. So this is the way that we're saying that what happens is that the husband overshadows his wife in this covenantal relationship, and then God in heaven overshadows the marriage as he overshadowed and protected the marriage of Abraham and Sarah. And the little tent over their head is open on all four sides to indicate the open hospitality of Abraham and Sarah. And that the people at the wedding would hope that this new couple would be as open and hospitable as Abraham and Sarah had been. Now, when it comes to Mary, remember what the angel said is that the Holy Spirit will come upon you and the power of the Most High will overshadow you. So this is the way that the Bible is telling us that the relationship, or that the covenantal relationship between Mary and God is going to be permanent, because God has overshadowed her in a covenantal way. And of course, she is going to give birth to the Son of God. And of course, at that moment, Mary then has Jesus growing inside her. Now, it's also noteworthy is that we frequently, I expect everybody probably already knows this, is that Mary is referred to as the Ark of the New Covenant. And here we have the Ark of the Old Covenant. The Ark of the Old Covenant had precious things inside it, and it was overshadowed by the Lord, by his glory cloud. And then over here, let's erase a little bit. That's the Ark of the Old Covenant. Over here we have the Ark of the New Covenant, which is Mary, and she's a pretty thing. And she's got little baby Jesus growing inside her. Now the question here would be, if you're God, what's going to be more important to you? Is an ark over here full of your stuff, or an ark over here full of your child? Well, that's no contest. Obviously, this ark is going to matter more to you than this ark. This one was overshadowed by the glory cloud, and this one was overshadowed by the power of the Most High. It's really very sweet. So these things, Mary kind of is a New Testament counterpart. She's correctly called the Ark of the New Covenant. And of course, she delivered baby Jesus, and the rest is history. Now, the fact that Mary was overshadowed is a good indication that Mary was ever virgin, because God's overshadowing her is covenantal. It's not something that you cancel out. It's not something that goes away. So from that moment, once she accepted the overshadowing of God the Father, she was dedicated to him in the same way that the ark was dedicated to its contents, that Elisha was dedicated to service to Elijah, and so forth. So it makes very good sense that if Mary was overshadowed, that she remained ever a virgin. Now, this is supposed to be a history all the way through Revelations. This theme continues in a Catholic church. In other words, here we had God's stuff. Here, I need to draw Mary again. Mary had actually little baby Jesus grown inside her. And over here in the Catholic Church, the same covenantal relationship continues. You have an altar, you have a little tabernacle, and Jesus is physically dwelling in his little house in here. Now, a lot of times, a Catholic church will have a big canopy over the top up here, which is symbolic of the overshadowing. Also, you can have a baldacchino, which is a little bit of a structure with some columns, which is also overshadowing. These are all recalling this overshadowing, this overshadowing, this overshadowing. It's saying that this relationship now is that God continues to overshadow his Son as he had been overshadowed inside Mary, because Jesus was physically present here, and God is physically present here in Jesus. Now, there's another thing, is at the Mass, there's a moment at Mass where the priest says, we'll ask that God please come down, let his Spirit come over these gifts and make them holy. And he makes this gesture, which is an overshadowing gesture. And again, that ties in to all the rest of this covenantal theme and permanence. Now, the thing about the Mass is that the Mass will go on and on and on and continue to maintain this covenantal and spousal relationship. Not only does God overshadow and protect Jesus in here, but this relationship is permanent with us. And this is going to be the case all the way until we get to the book of Revelations. And remember, the question is what does Revelations have to do with love and marriage? It has everything to do with love and marriage. Let's see if I can race a little bit more. Because we know what happens is the second coming. And at the time of the second coming, the old earth and the old heaven were swept away, and God sends down the New Jerusalem, and I just love it because he says it comes down like a bride adorned for her husband. I mean, it was something that I remember what it was like when I married my wife. It was just like the holy city coming down from heaven. And the thing that's so wonderful about this is that, of course, what's happening at the end of time is that Jesus, the bridegroom, is marrying his bride. And we all know that the bride is the church. And that church comprises, of course, men and women. So that relationship is covenantal more than it is spousal. But still, Jesus is marrying the church. And he loves her. And I know exactly how he feels about marrying his bride, because that's how I feel about my bride. She's so wonderful. And it's just the best thing to be around her. You just want it to last forever. And what happens at the very end of Revelations is Jesus has married his bridegroom. We have a great wedding feast, which we're already participating in at the Mass. And the last thing that happens is that Jesus, having married his bride, what the brides and bridegrooms do, they get married and then they move in together and they live together. And that's what happens. God comes and he dwells with his people. He lives with his bride forever and ever for all the rest of eternity in the New Jerusalem. It's like the definitive romance, it's just all the way across creation. It's this love affair between God and his people, which comes true and is made so visual in our human situation between husbands and their wives and the children that we make. So, thinking about Catholic moms wanting to instruct their children, remember, when you want to talk to your kids about love and marriage and all that kind of wonderful stuff, don't be afraid to use the Bible. But don't just use the Bible in bits and parts. Use the whole sweep of the Bible, get the big picture of the Bible. So remember, when you look at the Bible, think big, think Catholic. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.